Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Leadership Purpose with Dr. Robin podcast. I'm so glad you're here and listen to the podcast. I say it all the time, and I will continue to say it because I really do appreciate you for listening in. And because you've been such faithful listeners, you helped us get ranked in the top 5% of all podcasts globally, according to Listen Notes. So thank you so much for listening. And if you would continue to help us out, go ahead and submit a review to the podcast. It will really be appreciated. All right. So now today I'm talking with Debbie J. Goldman, PhD. Now, let me tell you a little bit about Dr. Debbie. She's a labor researcher, an advocate with decades of experience in telecommunications policy and workers' rights. And she's the author of the book Disconnected: Call Center Workers Fight for Good Jobs in the Digital Age. And for those who are on YouTube, you could see her putting the book up for us. And she has worked with the Communications Workers of America and has been at the forefront of efforts to protect workers from the negative impacts of corporate restructuring and digital surveillance. And I'm going to leave a teaser here to say she's demonstrating a lifelong commitment to learning. Now you have to stay tuned to hear more about how that plays out. Welcome, Dr. Debbie Goldman.
Oh, it's so wonderful to be here. Thank you so much.
I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're here. All right. So now you heard me read your introduction, but why don't you just tell us in your own words two things? A little, or whatever you want to say about yourself, and then about the work you do.
Okay. Well, I worked most of my professional life in the labor movement. I worked at the Communication Workers of America. It's a very major union. We represent over 500,000 workers. Comes out of the telephone industry when AT&T was the monopoly phone company and then was broken up in 1984. But now it's a very diverse union. Not only is it people who work in the wireless industry, in the video industry, in the uh, internet industry, but also we have members who work at newspapers, the LA Times, the New York Times, the Chicago Tribune, Washington Post. We have members who are flight attendants on United Airlines. We have people who work in customer service at American Airlines and others. We have manufacturing, people who work at General Electric, and we have government workers. Out in California, we have folks who work for the University of California system as researchers and other state and local government employees. So it's a very varied union. I would say it's people who work what I would call professional and technical jobs, skilled jobs. And I worked for almost 30 years in the national headquarters of the union in Washington, D.C. It was a fabulous job. And I worked in the research department. A large union research department has basically three roles. One is to assist our elected leaders as they go into collective bargaining with the employers. So we need to help them understand what's the financial condition of the company that they're bargaining with, what are their strategies, what's the future, so that when you're bargaining about not just wages and benefits, but also jobs and job security, what is the strategy of the company? What's the future? We also would help when people who don't have a union would want a union and would come to CWA and say, can you help us? We want to have a union in our workplace. We want to have a collective voice. As just individuals, we're powerless really to change what's happening. And so we would help them. And that, therefore, the research department's role is again to help understand the company. What are their strategies? What are leverage points so that you can help the people who want to organize a union in their workplace? And then the third thing that was our responsibility had to do with legislation and public policy. A union also cares about the big picture. What are the regulations and the laws that shape what we're doing in this society? And so we would help also research there. So my background is that I love to learn. I love to learn new things, and I love to figure out how to take what I've learned, the information I've gathered, and provide it to people who can use it to make their lives better. That's really what a union research department is about. And that's my background.
Yes, you really educated me, and I'm imagining others because it's not every day that we get to talk to someone that has the background that you have. So that's really fascinating. So tell me, what what prompted you to go into this type of work? I just mentioned it's something that we don't hear about every day, right? And so what prompted you to do this kind of work?
What prompted me is that I care about the fact that working people should have power to determine their work lives. They should not be um, automatons at work. We get our meaning. We spend a lot of our waking time at work, and therefore we want to get meaning from that work. And how do you get meaning from the work? It includes having some control over how you do that work. So I I was very interested to work in a union that is all about helping working people get power. Now, we look in our society today, we have these huge gaps between most of us and the few multimillionaires and billionaires who now are the top 10 billionaires in this country have as much wealth as the bottom 50% of Americans. This is not a good situation. And part of the reason we have that is because the companies that where many of us work have launched over the past 40 years a major attack on trying to take away the power of working people. Wages for working people have been flat for almost 50 years, while we've seen CEO pay and the top people who are making the big bucks skyrocket in their wealth. This is not good for a democracy. It's not good for an economy. And my view is one of the biggest ways that we can have equity and fairness in our society is to empower people at work so that they can come together collectively. And that's what a union's all about.
Mhm.
Now, when you said we don't hear it often, unfortunately, that's too much the case nowadays. Now, if we went back to the 1950s, 1960s, almost everybody would know somebody who was in a union. A third of the workforce was in a union. And at that point, we didn't even have very many unions for government workers. So we're talking about if you worked in a company, you were in a union. Well, beginning in the 1970s, there was a big attack by employers. They wanted to minimize the power of working people in our society in the workplace. And today, only about 12% or 11% of Americans are represented by a union. And in the private sector, it's down to 6%. And that's part of the reason why, despite the great wealth of our country, which is huge, we're the richest country in the world, so much flows just to the top because we
Yes.
don't have the mechanisms to ensure that the people who actually do the work and create the value are getting their fair share.
Yes, I hear your passion about this as you're educating us on this and you're educating me. I hear your passion come through. So now let's focus on your career journey for a while to see what kind of brought this passion to where we are today. So let's go back. Is there anything in your early life, like now, if what I'm hearing from you is it's important to make sure the workers are treated fairly and that they have everything they need. And so was there anything about little Debbie who wanted to fight for the rights of people or just stand up or had, some real commitment to helping others? Was there any hints of that in little Debbie
A
growing up?
great question. I think so much of our values are shaped by both our family, our community, and if we're fortunate enough to have some kind of religious community. My parents grew up in the Depression. And they came out and they became big supporters of Franklin Delano Roosevelt and the Democratic Party, seeing that at that point we had 250,000 Americans out of a job. Excuse me, a quarter of the population was out of a job. Tens of millions of people. Our economy was really in trouble. And in comes FDR, and he adopts all kinds of policies, Social Security, unemployment insurance, uh, child labor laws, minimum wage laws, putting people to work, all kinds of policies that were really helping people. And that was the environment my parents grew up in. And they taught me as I was growing up in the 1950s and 1960s that we needed to be thinking about our community and everybody and the policies so that we had good good communities. So my mother was on the school board. My father ran to be a delegate at the Democratic Convention. And then the other thing is, as I said, I grew up in the 60s. This was a period of great upheaval in our country. The civil rights movement, the women's movement, the anti-Vietnam War movement, all of these kinds of movements were part of what I was growing up in and seeing that people coming together could change things. Let me just tell you one story. My book, Disconnected, is about the telecommunications industry because that was the union I worked for. Would you believe that in 1970, if you were a woman and went to apply for a job at the telephone company, first of all, they would slot you to be either an operator or a customer service rep. You could not be a technician. There were 250,000 male technicians and 5 women. Similarly, there were 250,000 operators, 5 were men. If you went to apply at the phone company in 1970, literally the HR office, the employment office, if you were still living at home, they would go to talk to your parents. If you were married, they would go to talk to your husband. Is it okay for this sweet young thing to work for the phone company? We'll take care of her. The paternalism and the sexism was extraordinary. That's only 50 years ago,
Right.
fortunately. So my passions came out of seeing what we could do in a fight for justice. And as I learned more, that fight for justice was not just about women's rights. It was not just about civil rights. It was really about having the rights of those people who are working. And
Right.
I do want to add one more thing. The union I worked for, CWA, was majority women. And so what we helped our members with was for women to get better wages, to get family supporting jobs, to get opportunities if they wanted to go into those traditionally male jobs, that they would be able to do that. So I've seen, we call ourselves labor feminists, that we are feminists working for women's rights within the labor union movement.
That makes a lot of sense, especially as you talk about your family and the era, what was happening politically and socially at that time. So it makes a lot of sense that that sort of infused that passion in you to do this kind of work. And now that you're still continuing to get this message out through your book. Okay, so now with all that coming from little Debbie up through the years of doing that work, would you say you have a sense of purpose in your work? Do you feel like this is a part of your purpose or your purpose?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I've I've been blessed to be able to use the talents that I have to help people through my work. And that's what gives meaning and purpose.
Yes, yes. Now, would you say you deliberately set out to do that? So you are like, I want to have meaning and purpose, and this is what I'm going to do. Or did you start doing the work and suddenly realize, oh, I have meaning and purpose from this work? How did it happen?
My career was not linear. When I finished college, I had always loved history, and I decided I wanted to be a high school social studies teacher. And so when I finished college, I went and got education certification and then began as a high school social studies teacher, which I loved. And so that was a first purpose that I had. Unfortunately, when I went into that, was just at a time when there was a taxpayer revolt against paying property taxes. And so there were cuts in the budgets available for schools. And I had been teaching for 2, 3 years. I was low on the totem pole and I lost the job. And then I tried to figure out, well, what am I going to do? And I was fortunate to actually get a writing job where I worked as a ghostwriter for two wonderful, wonderful labor leaders. One, John Sweeney, who later became the head of the National Federation, the AFL-CIO, and the other, Karen Nussbaum. Some of your listeners may be aware of her. She was the founder of a wonderful organization called 9 to 5. Some of you may have seen the movie, the Jane Fonda movie, and heard the Dolly Parton song. Well, all of that really comes out of a social movement that Karen Nussbaum. And we wrote a book called Solutions for the New Workforce. And the argument there was working people, we're no longer an industrial economy. We're a service economy. And who are the workers? Women, people of color, immigrants. And that means we have to have both public policies and workplace policies that recognize the need to balance work and family, that recognize the need for training, recognize the need for pay equity, recognize the need for, dare I use the word, opportunities, I guess is now the way we say it rather than saying affirmative action. And as I worked writing that book, I realized, yes, this is what I want to do. I want to work in the labor movement. And my skills are research and writing. And fortunately, I was able to get a job in a research department of a major national union.
Yes, it sounds like you really did have the ideal way to put your talents to work in a way that was meaningful and helped others. Sounds like you made sure you were intentional about doing that too.
One is fortunate. I was fortunate to have the education that would give me that opportunity. But I also continued my education. I realized, yes, I knew how to be a researcher in with words, but in order to work in a union research department, you really have to be good at numbers. You have to be able to read financial statements, public budgets. So I went back to school, and my first, well, actually, it was my second master's was in public policy from the University of Maryland. And then eventually, I raised two sons, and I now have 5 grandchildren, and I'm so very blessed. If you talk about meaning in life, that is the best. Um, and when my sons went off to college, I realized, well, I got some more time on my hands. I'm working full time, but what am I going to do with this extra time? So I went back again for a PhD in labor history, US labor history at the University of Maryland, a wonderful, wonderful school. And it took quite a number of years, but I finally got the PhD at age 69. So I want all your listeners to know that you can keep going. And then after I wrote the dissertation, I got a book contract, and that's what Disconnected Call Center Workers Fight for Good Jobs is really a rewrite of my dissertation.
Congratulations on all of that for making the decision to go back and do it. And then no matter how long it took, you just stayed the course and finished the program and got your PhD. Congratulations. I can relate to that in some ways because I went back later in life to get my PhD, and it took quite some time because I was also working. And I know the effort that it takes to do that. So good for you.
It does take a lot. And I think one of the things you have to learn is how you can maintain your focus. When I was started writing the dissertation, I would wake up at 6 in the morning and say, I'm going to write a page or a paragraph. It didn't work. My head was really around the challenges I was thinking about in my paid employment. And so I took, I went on a part-time schedule where I did one week a month where I would write, and 3 weeks a month I would do my job. But that still was a problem. So finally, when I retired, I was able to focus full-time on completing that dissertation.
Yes, I can
People
see
are
how that.
different.
What was the last thing you just said?
People are different. You
Yes,
hear the
right.
novelists who have a house full of kids and they say, well, I wake up at 5 in the morning and I write. And I think, I couldn't do that, didn't work for me.
Yeah, I can understand that. And especially from my perspective with the dissertation, you have to carry a thought over a long period of time and a long series of research segments within this one book, if you want to call it that. So it really requires a particular focus and concentration. So bravo.
Thank you.
All right. So now you know the podcast is Leadership Purpose. And the podcast is for what I call high achieving women. And here's my definition of high achieving women: women who are ambitious, responsible, they're good at a few things. They're the ones that people come to. And by the way, they could any number of these could make up a high achieving woman, not all of them necessarily. All right, so they're the ones that people come to in their professional lives. You know, they just kind of want to get advice for them, or like they're the kind of wisdom keeper. And in their personal life, whether it's family, neighbors, community, whatever they're involved in, people kind of come and rely on them to hear what they have to say about it. So this is the woman we're speaking to. And she's at a point in her business or career where everything looks good on paper, nothing to really complain about. But now she's at the point where it feels like something's missing, not in terms of material goods, but in terms of the sense of meaning that you and I were talking about and purpose. She feels like that's missing and she can't quite put her finger on what's happening. And she's kind of nervous about if she thinks about it too much or if she goes in that direction, she might have to sacrifice everything she's worked for. So she's the woman that we're speaking to in this moment. Now, with her in mind, she's trying to get to meaning and purpose. What's something from your experience, personally or professionally, something you can say to encourage her or lift her up while she's on this pursuit?
I really believe that you need to be involved with other people and have a collective purpose. That if it's only about yourself, going to the next rung, getting a higher pay, getting a higher title, that's not ultimately what gives you purpose. But if you're joining with others to try and make things better, not just for yourself, but for others as well, that's what gives you a sense of purpose.
Okay, well said. Well said. And now we could pass that on to them. All right. So now you've given us so much. I mean, for me, I've learned a lot from all that you've talked about here. But now, is there anything that I didn't get a chance to ask you that you feel like, well, I'd like to say one more thing before we can tell people how they can reach you if they're interested in that? So, is there something I didn't ask or one more thought before we go?
Well, I think we're in a really challenging time right now. And I think we do need to come together, not be overwhelmed by the challenges in front of us, whether it's the politics that we see, the economic challenges, the political challenges. But I think if we join together with other people, then we can see how we can use our power. And we do, as individuals, we have some power. But when we come together, whether it's in our community or in our workplace, then we have more power. And I think we have to recognize too that we live within a particular political and economic environment. and what we can achieve and the meaning we can find from it is influenced by that larger environment. And we have to think about what is it that is our barriers toward everybody having opportunity to find meaning and purpose. And how can we use our skills to expand that? And that's the challenge right now. It's a very, very challenging time in our country and around our world. Not only do we have climate change, which is such a challenge, but we also have deep threats to our democracy. And we all have to be out there fighting for our democracy with other people.
And we can tell by your story that you've been doing this for years. You've been committed to it, and in various ways, shapes, and forms, you've been following this commitment and doing it with passion and purpose. So thank you for doing that, and thank you for being here.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it. Now, if someone's trying to reach you, if they want to hear more, is there a way they can be in touch with you? Or
I'm happy to have them reach out to me. I can give my email address. Should I do that now?
yes, we can put it in the show notes for you if that's one way people can reach you. You can say it now, and we can also put it in the show notes.
My email is dgoldman1872@gmail.com. And I
Okay.
also want to encourage people, if you want to hear more about what I've written about, disconnected call center workers fight for good jobs in the digital age, gives you a really, really broad view of what's going on both in the communications industry and in our larger society. You can find the book anywhere that you order your books, online or at a retail bookstore. Thank you.
Okay, we'll be sure to put that in the show notes. Dr. Debbie Goldman, thank you so much for sharing your insights and your education with us here today.
Thank you.
Okay, everyone, I'd love for you to stay in touch and I'd love to hear from you. Go ahead and follow me on LinkedIn. And I'm on all the social media channels, but I've spent most of my time on LinkedIn. I'd love for you to connect and follow, get more information about what we're doing here. And you can reach me at Robin L. Owens, PhD, at Robin L. Owens, PhD. And until next time, this is Dr. Robin.